Here we are seeing the inferior surface of the brain. In the inferior surface of the brain, we can identify two cerebral hemispheres. This is the part of the lateral sulcus. This is the lateral sulcus. This is the basilar part of the pons. Here we can also identify the crus of the midbrain. These two are the crushes of the midbrain. This is the medulla oblongata, and these are the two cerebellar hemispheres. We are focusing on the circle of Willis, the blood supply of the brain. In this video, the first thing we can identify here is the basilar artery. This basilar artery is formed by the union of two vertebral arteries on the pontomedullary junction. From here, the basilar artery commences. It gives off 5 branches. The first branch it gives off is the AICA, or the anterior inferior cerebellar artery. This supplies the anterior inferior part of the cerebellar hemispheres. The next arteries are the small branches known as the pontine arteries. These here, the small branches supply the pontine surface. We can see it over here also. Next artery we can identify here. This is the superior cerebellar artery. The superior cerebellar artery supplies the superior part of the cerebellum. These two are the terminating branches of the basilar artery known as the posterior cerebral arteries. This posterior cerebral arteries supply the posterior part of the cerebrum. The next artery we can see is the internal carotid artery. These two are the internal carotid artery. This structure over here is the optic chiasma. This internal carotid artery is present just lateral to the optic chiasma. This internal carotid artery gives off this one over here, the middle cerebral artery. The middle cerebral artery, which supplies the middle part of the cerebrum, passes off laterally into the lateral sulcus. These are the anterior cerebral arteries. The anterior cerebral arteries supply the frontal pole and the frontal lobe. These two anterior cerebral arteries are connected together by the anterior communicating artery. And the internal carotid artery also gives off this branch known as the posterior communicating branch, which completes the circle of Willis as a connection between the internal carotid artery and the basilar artery, specifically the posterior cerebral artery. Here, these are the two posterior communicating branches. It acts as the collateral system of circulation in case of any blockage of the internal carotid artery or the basilar artery. So the circle of Willis is formed by the anterior communicating artery, the two anterior cerebral arteries, posterior communicating arteries, posterior cerebral arteries, and then the basilar artery. This is the circle of Willis.